Welcome everybody to today's workshop on Ukrainian song. Very pleased to have today Alex Kuzma, who is former music director of the Yale Russian Chorus and also executive director of the Ukrainian Catholic Education Foundation. Is that right, Alex?
Yep.
And for those of you who are tuning in on YouTube, we welcome you to listen in. As you see, this is part of what we do online. We get together online and we learn about the music that we are performing, the language, so that we can perform it better. So this is all part of what we do behind the scenes to create the videos that you all are enjoying. So Alex, why don't you take it from here?
Thanks very much, Louis, and welcome, brothers. It's wonderful to see a lot of good faces on the call. I really appreciate this. I know the Yale Russian Chorus has always been very diligent and sensitive to the linguistic and literary nuances of the various languages in which we dare to sing. And this is a particularly poignant time, I'd say, for Ukrainian Americans and Ukrainians living around the world. By the way, the Ukrainian diaspora used to be kind of limited to the United States, Canada, Australia, and Great Britain and Germany. And now it's in dozens and dozens of countries. There's Ukrainian business people working in places like Sri Lanka and South Africa and Abu Dhabi and other places. So, and what's interesting, just for a little bit of background on the Ukrainian language, you know, for many years, the language had been severely repressed. In fact, I did some research on this in anticipation of this workshop and found that over the years, over the course of about 3 centuries, there were 41 edicts issued by the Tsarist government, the Soviet government, the Polish government, either banning the use of Ukrainian in schools or banning Ukrainian publications. And in spite of that pretty heavy persecution of the language and repression of the language, today, Ukrainian is spoken by about 40 million people around the world, about 35 million within the country and about 5 million beyond. And that's just to kind of give you a frame of reference, because I sort of did some comparative analysis of this. You know, we all know our Irish friends are very proud of their culture, but there's only about 1.2 or 1.3 million people that still speak Gaelic. I mean, for Ukrainian to have survived and actually flourished as much as it has, especially over the last 30 years since Ukraine regained its independence, is quite remarkable. But in any case, I think Ukrainians, of course, are, and myself coming from Ukrainian roots, we tend to be pretty biased about the beauty of our language. But I've even heard this from other people that are Slavic language experts, that Ukrainian in many ways is sort of the Slavic analog to, if you're looking at sort of Romance languages. In many ways, Ukrainian is sort of like Spanish or Italian. It really lends itself to a sort of a kind of bel canto singing. It's a very open, very clear diction, very open vowels, consistent vowels, where in Russian, you know, depending on the accent of a word, you know, maybe daragiye, dorogiye, you know, all of those nuances come into play. In Ukrainian, basically what you see is what you get. Once you learn the alphabet, the pronunciation of words or vowels certainly does not change unless it's palatalized. We do have palatalizations. And Ukrainians often say that, you know, ours is a nightingale's language, solovina mova. I don't know what the Russian solovini yazyk, I guess it would be in Russian, you know, so the language of nightingales, because it lends itself so well to music. So enough of that backdrop. So I just wanted to, again, thank you all for your interest in this subject. And I thought, you know, rather than go into a lot of polemics about all of this, we could, you know, just focus on the words, you know, for each song, so that if there are questions about pronunciation, you could run them by me and I'll give you my best answer. Now, of course, within Ukrainian, there are local distinctions sometimes. Like my parents come from the western end of Ukraine. Our language has a little bit more of a smidgen of Polish. My parents actually spoke fluent Polish in addition to Ukrainian. People in the east of Ukraine tend to have a thicker, more Russian accent in their Ukrainian, and have also, there was a time where there was something called Surjik, which is a type of language that is mixture of Russian and Ukrainian. That's frowned upon these days. People are trying to maintain distinct linguistic roots. But anyway, so I thought, maybe we could just start with Oina Hori, since that's one that, across the generations of YRCers and alumni, that's one that we all know.
Oh, that sounds good. Would you like me? I have it up on my screen. Would you like me to share?
Yeah,
screen and then we can just go through it.
That would be a lot easier because my screen competence is sometimes lacking. So.
Okay.
All right.
Here we go.
Right. And it's terrific. By the way, Louis, you've done a fabulous job on the transliterations and the transfer of the original Ukrainian text. So,
well, thank you. I've been learning a lot of Ukrainian along the way. It's been a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, this is great. My daughter Taryn is now at Bard College, and she's having to learn. She's a graduate student in voice right now. So she actually gave a concert yesterday, but she's having to learn like chunks of German poetry and German text and Latin and Italian, and so this is we're all in the same pickle trying to learn additional languages here. But anyway.
I've actually a question before we get started here.
Sure.
When we perform this, we often will sing like just the first verse or the first couple of verses. Mm-hmm. I don't know what your feeling is, but my feeling is this is telling a story, mm-hmm. and we should probably tell that story in the future. Do all the verses. What do you think? I
mean, I think that would be terrific if we did. I don't want to we have a lot of learning to do between now and whenever the next concert's going to be. Right. So I don't want to, place a burden on the choir. But yeah, it's kind of a humorous story, but a lot of tongue in cheek in it. And so this is, this is the story of Petrosa Haydachny, who's one of the first hetmans of the Cossack host in Zaporizhia. In southeastern Ukraine, and at that time, the primary enemy was the Turkish Empire and the Crimean Tatars. Today, by the way, you'll be happy to know that Ukrainians and Crimean Tatars have almost totally reconciled. It's actually very exciting. Even at our university, the Catholic University has been inviting Crimean Tatar leaders like Mustafa Jemilev and other folks that have been coming to Ayla Bakali. So it's kind of remarkable that after 400 years, Ukrainians and Tatars, even though we agree to disagree on maybe our religious roots, but the feelings have been very cordial. And after the Russian invasion of Crimea, there actually has been no refugee crisis because basically the Tatar community has been welcomed into mainland Ukraine, and so that's a little bit of background on that. But here it is. So Oina Hori Tamzhenci Jnut. That's a mouthful. Everybody, if you want to just say Jnut. So that's the toughest word. And that's, Jate means to harvest. So on the hills, it's actually one hill, Oina Hori. In Ukrainian, it would be Oina Horach if it was multiple hills, but that's irrelevant. It can be on the hills. So the harvesters are harvesting. Oina Hori Tamzhenci Jnut. Apopid horoyu. And here's one thing that used to bother me, but I didn't draw much attention to it. A lot of times YRC guys would pronounce this in the way they would a Russian thing. So in Russian, you would say apopid, apopid. In Ukrainian, again, if it's O, it's always O. So it's apopid horoyu. That's one little nuance. If we could bring that in, just have it apopid horoyu, dolom dolenoyu, kozake duch. Let's see, we're back up on, if you would, yeah, dolom dolenoyu. And again, you'll see all right on measure 11, all those O's are pronounced like O, just straight AW or O. Dolom dolenoyu kozake duch. And a lot of times, YRC guys traditionally would pronounce it Kazaki. That's the way you would pronounce it in Russian if you were singing a Don Cossack song, but in Ukrainian, it would be kozake duch. So O is one surefire distinction between Ukrainian and Russian.
By the way, some people who learned the song before, there was a likely error in the text of the earlier version. Some of us had learned it as dolin dolinoyu, but Alex and I reviewed it, and we think that dolom dolinoyu is more accurate.
Right. It's the I wish I could remember the technical word for it in grammar, but dolom is along the valley, along the ravine. Dolom dolinoyu kozakidu. So up on the hilltops, the harvesters are harvesting the wheat or the grain, and below they're looking down and they see the column of Cossacks are moving across the valley.
Alex,
Any questions?
Sure.
Sure.
Tell us the difference between the E and the Yuri, the E and the Y, the I and the Y transliteration in Ukrainian.
Yes, there is, in Ukrainian, there is no yuri.
Yeah.
You know, so it's a straight E sound, just as you would on something like hill, spit, pit, E. Just E. There's no there's no kind of deeper throat sound there. And E is always E. Again, makes it simple, you know, so anytime you see I in the Ukrainian text, it will always be pronounced E.
And Y is pronounced E?
Yeah, Y is pronounced E, like short I, and E like, you know, long I.
So it's not too far from the English distinction between ship and sheep, right?
Exactly. Yep. And it's really nothing more complicated than that. That's all you need to be aware of.
Thanks.
Okay. Cool.
All right. So that's it repeats the end of the words in the phrase. Verse. We'll go back up to verse 2 now.
Right. And then let's see.
Alex,
Yes.
just to, so do I understand correctly that the only palatalized syllable and nuch?
Right, nuch. That's the only palatalized. It's at the end of yeah. And palatalizations, that's something Ukrainians and Russians have in common. We do palatalize in the same way. So the myaky knock. Yeah.
One difference is that in Russian, there are a lot like vowels will palatalize, whereas in Ukrainian, it's very clear where it is palatalized, where it is not. So like at the end of jnut, you see that there is a soft sign in the Cyrillic. So that is a clue that it is palatalized. But the previous word, gensi, those are not palatalized.
Right.
Whereas maybe, well, I guess that's not, in Russian, those wouldn't be palatalized, but in lots of other places, Russian would, an or an E would cause palatalization to happen. And that's not the case in Ukrainian.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. Okay. So the second verse, Poperedu Doroshenko. So Doroshenko is one of the chieftains of the Cossack host. Poperedu means out ahead, riding at the head of the column is Doroshenko.
Right. So you all hear peredu, there's no palatalization after the vowels here.
Yep. So yeah, very clear. Poperedu, no palatalizations, no yot, no y kind of sound in between. Just very clear. Again, forgive me if I tend to beat this, you know, idea into your heads, but what you see is what you get. So Poperedu Doroshenko. So, and again, you see right across that frame, Doroshenko. So he, you know, he was one of the original Cossack leaders back in the I think like the 1600s, early 1600s or late 1500s. And then Vede svoje visko, so he's leading his army. Vede svoje visko is like, I think in Polish it's wojsko, but it's, you know, the army, the voyevode, it's one of the words that occurs often. So Vede svoje visko zaporizhske, and you got to really work on that E to really get that, you know, diction on the E. So Vede svoje visko, and then the next line down, I think next page.
Yeah, before you go,
sure.
For those who are familiar with Russian Cyrillic, look at the word svoye. So you'll see there's a letter that looks like a rounded E. That is a yeah sound. So there is a yot in front of that. Whereas A normal that's square, it does not have that. So
Right.
be aware of that distinction.
Yep. And Visko Zaporizhske, the army of the Zaporizhia, Horoshenko, so leads it well. He's хорошо, like in Russian, being a word for good or proper. Horoshenko is the idea that he's leading his army well. And then the irony in the piece, the comedy actually comes when they compare Doroshenko as a good leader as opposed to Sahaidachny, who's not such a good leader, and actually this is probably inaccurate historically, because Sahaidachny actually was considered a very effective commander and waged a number of battles, but the Cossacks actually had a fairly humorous attitude. They used to tease each other. There's the famous painting of Repin, with them writing the nasty letter to the Turkish Sultan, and they're laughing their guts off, right? They prided themselves on maintaining their sense of humor in spite of many horrible battles, many defeats, pogroms. I mean, all the worst, the best and the worst of what the Cossacks represented. They tried to find humor in their bleak fate sometimes. So Sahaidachny, he was a 16th century leader. And so the next verse, the third verse, Apozadu Sahaidachny, again, Apozadu Sahaidachny. So, and so in the back, bringing up the rear, literally, bringing up the rear, there's Sahaidachny, right? And there's the feeling that, and then he's singing, oh, sorry.
Then prodał swoją.
Yeah, prodał swoją żonkę. So he sold his wife for a bag of tobacco and a nice pipe. Of course, very sexist, very, inappropriate by modern standards, but what can you say? It's, we're trying to be authentic historically at the same time. So yeah, Cossacks prided themselves in the fact that they could leave family behind, leave their wife behind, go off for 5-10 years, keep fighting, maybe come back in one piece. And so, a wife is a burden, in the battlefield or even on campaign, but, a good pipe and some tasty tobacco is something that keeps up the spirit. So that's the concept here. Okay.
Okay, so we're good with that verse. Now back on to verse 4.
Yeah. And then here's Sahaidachny explaining to his fellow soldiers why he sold his wife. So so for me, I don't want my wife hanging around. That's kind of what he's singing, right? So Nevozitya means she's inconvenient for me. It's a little bit of a, not a literal term, but even in Ukrainian, it's a little bit offbeat. But yeah, meni žinkoju nevozitya. So
let's actually, a question came up in chat. Let's stop for a sec. And
sure.
Going back to the word Sahaidachny. So in the Cyrillic, you'll see that there is the I and then the, I don't know how you say ikratkaya in Ukrainian, but the E with a little hat, the little carrot on the top. So both of those we translate as Y, but the final Y is really kind of it's a glide, a yes. So maybe say that word Sahaidachny slowly so people can pick up the diphthong there, maybe.
Yeah. So, and you got two diphthongs there. So it's Sahaidachny, so, and even if with a, professional Ukrainian choir, you might not pick up that last yot, but as it transitions through, you hear Sahaidachny. Yeah, that's how it's pronounced, Sahaidachny.
Right.
And Apozadu Sahaidachny. So pozadu means in the back, in the rear. And yeah, so prodał swoją żonkę.
Oh, good. Let's stop there. Notice that again, as Alex is saying, what you see is what you get. So voiced consonants stay voiced at the ends of words, like prodav. That's not prodaf, that's prodav.
Right, right. And actually, in Western Ukraine, there's a tendency to pronounce it prodau, almost like a W, but that's not proper. You should, like good Ukrainians should pronounce it prodav with a V, clear V sound. So yeah, prodав свою жінку. So he sold his wife. Tютюн is, yeah, so tютюн is tobacco. За tютюн, so for tobacco. Та люльку. Lulka is a pipe, but it's like a folk pipe. It's kind of a handmade, sort of handcrafted pipe that is distinctive. So lulka is something that you know, Ukrainian villagers would craft in their own little workshops, and he likes the look of this little piece of craft. And then neobachny means it's not a. Sorry, that's not a very easy word to translate, but neobachny means lacking in vision, or lacking in perception as to what might come in handy. Yeah, so you know, neobachny, what the hell's wrong with you? You sold your wife, and you know you didn't see that your wife would come in handy sometimes. So neobachny means lacking perspicuity. You know, it's lacking foresight of how she might come in handy. Again, totally politically incorrect, but there you have it. Okay, so and then
a question came up. We might as well
sure
deal with it now. The H sound in Sahaydatchny, which would be often a G in Russian. Let's
and never in Ukrainian. H is a H, always H, never G. There actually is a separate Ukrainian letter called G. It's used rarely, and there are very few words that use it. But yeah, that's a dead giveaway that you guys are singing Ruski dialect if you're singing Sagaidachny nilza. Okay, you gotta avoid Sahaydatchny. H is very, and the same thing in liturgical music. You might remember when we would sing Hospodi, right? Like Hospodi pomiluj. In Church Slavonic, you have the H sound as opposed to the Gospodi. You don't sing Gospodi, you sing Hospodi, right? So keep that in mind. Ukrainian is more, has more similarity to sort of Church Slavonic and the old Bulgarian, Croatian type of pronunciation. Any other questions before we go to verse 4? Okay, so here's where it gets really goofy, all right? So the fourth verse is where he's trying to explain, like, maybe I'm not lacking foresight. Maybe it was a really smart thing for me to get rid of my wife. He says, meni zhinkoyu. So meni means for me, meni zhinkoyu, with a wife, nevozitya. Nevozitya means not convenient. For me, wife, not convenient. You know what I'm saying? It's not good for me. So it's nevozitya. Meni zhinkoyu nevozitya. Tютюн та люлька, right? So when you sing in measure, what is that? 37. Tютюн та люлька. So but good tobacco and a good pipe. Kozaku v dorozi prihoditya. For a Cossack on the road, definitely will come in handy. Prihoditya means will come in handy, or will be advantageous. So that's it.
Any questions on Oi Nahori? Or Oi Nahori? Is it Hori or Hore?
Hori, again,
Hori, yeah, right.
E, always clear across. Yeah.
Okay, I've forgotten which it is. Okay.
That's okay. And then also like the last word, prihoditsa, again, the H, H. When you think singing Ukrainian, think of H more often than G. You know, just remember it'll be the real H sound will be very clear.
So for everyone's clarity, there's one song that some people think of as Ukrainian in our repertoire because it deals with Cossacks, which is Vyotsa Sizadim. That is not Ukrainian. That is in Russian. And it's from a later period. I suspect at that time, that's maybe from the period, Alex, when Ukrainian was was less favored, and so the imperial language was Russian. That would be my guess of what was going on there.
Yeah, I think that's a fair guess. Again, historians might disagree. And I may be wrong about this, but I sort of have the sense that Vyotsa was more of a song that would have been sung like by the Don Cossacks, or I mean, there's some blending there too, because when Catherine, Ukrainians never call her the Great, by the way, but when Empress Catherine deported about 50 or 60,000 Ukrainians to the Donbass, and then further out to Kuban and the lower Rostov, those guys, even to this day, a lot of those people still speak a pretty heavy Ukrainian pronunciation of Russian, even when they're speaking Russian. They, for instance, will say havarit as opposed to gavarit. They will still use that h sound. But yeah, I think that was more, they call those stanitsi. Those were like the villages or the settlements in the prairies in southern Russia. So that's where Vyotsa, I think that's more where Vyotsa comes from.
Right. So a question came up, and again, it's in the category of what you see is what you get. So in words like vozitsia, that is a palatalized sia at the end. Yep. Whereas in Russian, it would be vozitsa or something.
Yeah, sa. It would be straight sa. But here, yeah, do pay attention to the little apostrophes. And Lewis did a great job in being very, very clear and distinct in that. So yeah, treat those apostrophes seriously. That is your palatalization sign.
And another request, Alex, before we leave this, why don't you just read the verses uninterrupted, so we have that. And by the way, I'll pull that out and then take that segment and put it in the study folder, so you can then just listen and review that. Sound good, Alex?
Sure, sounds great. Thank you. So, oi na hori ta женці жнуть. Oi na hori.
Actually, before
slower,
it just occurs to me, I've got the words at the end, so let's just look at the words.
Oh yeah, that's easier. Yeah. Okay, so here it is. Ой на горі та женці жнуть. Ой на горі та женці жнуть. А попід горою, долом долиною, козаки йдуть. Гей, долиною, гей, широкою козаки йдуть. Okay. Second verse. Попереду Дорошенко. Попереду Дорошенко. Repeat. Веде своє військо, військо Запорізьке, хорошенько. Гей, долиною, гей, широкою, хорошенько. And notice the palatalization on хорошенько, okay? So, and then in the back, bringing up the rear. А позаду Сагайдачний. А позаду Сагайдачний. Продав свою жінку за тютюн та люльку необачний. Гей, долиною, гей, широкою необачний. And then Сагайдачний responds why he got rid of his wife. Okay, so мені з жінкою не возиться. Мені з жінкою не возиться. А тютюн та люлька козаку в дорозі пригодиться. Гей, долиною, гей, широкою пригодиться. That's it.
Yeah, and in the display here, unfortunately, the comment boxes are obscuring the transliteration. Some, I apologize for that. I just noticed that now. But in any event, you heard what Alex said, and so you can go back and review the text in the score if you have any questions. Okay, any other questions before we move on? All right, okay. So
thank you. Thanks for your attention. All right, so here's Zirvalasya. Oh, and Louis, I just noticed, I mean, everybody knows what the word is, but Zirvalasya, for some reason, it came out Zirvadasya on the first measure. But, that's, I don't think anybody's going to make that mistake because you have the transliteration is perfect. So no harm done.
Oh, the,
See,
oh,
and I
oh,
missed
yes,
that.
it
My
is.
fault. Yeah,
No, it
big
is, it is my mistake. It just a typo. It looked, in my
Yeah.
poor eyesight, it looked like an L, but it's a D.
Okay.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, very cool. Okay, so you know, we've done a lot of sort of exegesis on this, so I don't want to go into that detail, but just pronunciation with maybe a little bit, you know, of what words might mean. The word zirvalasya is, even for Ukrainians, it's a very distinctive word, and it actually has a little bit of onomatopoeic value. Rvate in Ukrainian means to tear open or to rip open. Rvate, and so zirvalasya means like out of nowhere, you know, there was a storm that ripped across the countryside. So it's actually a very beautiful word for the image of a horrific war that is just burst on the horizon. And, you know, as you know, Ukrainians having experienced many invasions, that's sort of what it feels like. So zirvalasya hurtovina. Hurtovina also is not a common word in Ukrainian. So the author, Bitvitsky, was very careful in the words he selected. Hurtovina is like a whirlwind or a sudden cyclone, something that just erupts on the horizon. So both of these words are very beautiful words poetically for Ukrainian readers. And then topche zbizha, that's a tough word. Zbizha is like any kind of grain. It could be oats, it could be wheat, but zbizha is kind of the generic word for that. And it's a tough word even for Ukrainians to pronounce, so don't feel bad if you're struggling with that. It's like a double zhuzha, zbizha, nalanu.
And notice also, as distinct from Russian, in Russian, you would never palatalize a zh.
Yeah.
But this zbizha, that is a palatalized, the second zh is palatalized, just to make it extra hard for you all. But again, it's what you see is what you get.
Yeah. And I wouldn't worry too much about that because it's such a, you know, infinitesimal split second when you pronounce that. Even for Ukrainian choir, it'd be tough to get that little bit of nuance. It's terrific if you can, zbizha, a little bit, but it's almost undetectable. So, you know, if you're pressed for time and you want to learn, you know, the whole piece, I mean, it's brilliant if we can get that little palatalization, but don't kill yourselves if you're really struggling with it. So topche zbizha means, it's like in the Battle Hymn of the Republic, trampled the waves of grain. So topche means trampled, literally. Okay. So next line down. Viryajala. Oh wait, we're still, yeah. So this is where there's that kind of the idea behind the arrangement was that the mother is that as this storm is brewing on the horizon, the mother, realizing what's happening to her son, is almost nauseated by the image of him going off to war and probably never returning again. So it's the idea of sort of like grieving, keening, you know, heaving sobs, you know, that's kind of that's that image you want in your head as you're doing that opening line of the song, before the little prelude, before you actually launch into the full verse. So there it is. Topche zbizha nalanu. Lan is like a wide open meadow, or, you know, vast kind of, it's bigger than a meadow. It's sort of like a steppe, but not quite, you know, it's, anyway, think vast. Nalanu.
Like the polya in
right.
Konya.
Yeah, exactly. And then another word, viryajala, in measure 12 there. Viryajala is also a kind of a loaded word. It can mean packing to go off somewhere, to go on a trip, viryajala, but it's also supplying. So the Ukrainian mamas have a terrible reputation for being overprotective. Trust me, I had one. So, you know, and our friends in the Jewish community also say, yeah, you know, Jewish mamas and Ukrainian mamas, they're all kind of made of the same cloth. But Viryajala is probably overpacking her poor son, trying to figure out a way to bring him comfort, maybe getting an extra stash of food into that backpack before he notices that she's overpacking him or something like that. So it's sort of a sweet, but also a loaded word, Viryajala. Mati, mother, svoho syna, her sons. And again, in Russian it would be svoyevo. In Ukrainian it's just straight, svoho, oo. right? Just straight that way. Sina ukrivavuyu. Krivava means bloody. So krov, in Russian is blood. In Ukrainian, it's krov, not with no F type sound. So krivavuyu, you got double V. You got 3 V's there. Ukrivavuyu vinu. And V is a gorgeous consonant to sing through. And so really, as you're singing that for diction's sake, really overloading the V's is a beautiful thing if you can do it, okay? So that's basically what that is. So Virya Jala Mate Svoho Sina Ukrivavuyu vinu. And Krivava also is, the blood concept is thick. I mean, it's the little bit of onomatopoeia of sort of ripping veins open. I mean, there's nothing, no subtlety in that word. It's bloody. It's a bloody mess. She's anticipating a bloody mess in this war. Okay, and then it's her little chant, the pulsation of her heart as she's sending her son off to war. Navinu, Navinu, idesinu, Navinu. And so she's kind of getting this in her head, in her heart, trying to purge the thought that he's really going to war. She's trying to almost delude herself into thinking that he's going off on some kind of a trip, but she's chanting it, almost keening, grieving. Navinu, Navinu, idesinu, Navinu. And then she sings, right? So idesinu. That I, again, you see how that open, the short I sounds. Idesinu, moya detino, my child. So it's a very tender, inappropriately tender, when she calls him detino, it's like the dude is, is a grown man, or, I mean, there were child soldiers in Ukrainian armies as well, but anyway, but the idea that he's still a child is kind of, bitterly laughable, that she's calling him moya detino. And then utoy zhorstoki, another very, good crunchy word. Zhorstoki means cruel or ruthless. Zhorstoki, you want that, you really want to dig into those consonants to really crunch on those consonants. Zhorstoki, luti bi. Luti means fierce or ferocious or, relentless. B is a short word for battle. So B is like, I don't know, Louis or other Russian scholars, is there a word like boy? I don't know if.
Well, there's vaina, right?
Vaina, but like battle, what's battle in Russian? I'm sorry. Is it bitva or I don't know. Anyway.
I don't recall, sorry.
It's okay, but that's the word. B is, it's a very literally punchy B,
It was to fight in
fight,
Russian.
yeah.
So,
Bitsa, yeah, like, bitsa, this is the same root of that word, so B, right. Okay. Vyzvolyate means to liberate. Vyzvolyate, volia is the word for freedom. So vyzvolyate is like taking out of bondage and liberating your country. Vyzvolyate, ridnu is native. Ukrainu, your native Ukraine, to liberate your native Ukraine. Boronite narid svi. Boronite means to defend. Narid is people or nation. Svi means your own. And so you notice the syntax there. It's actually Vitvitsky, when he wrote this. And by the way, I don't know if you, a little bit of the backstory on that one. I thought growing up, we used to sing this song and, our kiddie camps and stuff like that. And I always thought it was just a regular folk song that somebody picked it up but apparently it was written in a refugee camp at the end of World War II by a guy named Vasil Vitvitsky. He was a very fine musician. And I met his son years later. His son was a US attorney in New Jersey, Bohdan Vitvitsky, who also served as an advisor to the Ministry of Justice in Ukraine because his expertise was in combating white collar crime in New Jersey, which, was a good thing to know about as you're trying to take on corruption in Ukraine. But anyway, enough of that backstory. But Vitvitsky,
but this is interesting because this is another instance, and we've seen this again and again, where a song was composed by somebody, but then it becomes a sort of internalized as folk music. Yeah. And we see that happening right now with Koim in Russia. Yep. That was written just 25 years ago, but people think of it as being something that's been around for centuries. It's kind of the same similar thing here.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, the theme and the almost the icon of the mother sending her son off to war is in many Ukrainian folk songs. You know, I mean, sadly it's a brutal reality over the centuries. So, but yeah, but his selection of words was really very poetic, and that's why I was really, you know, inspired by this song. So, you notice the rhyme is very, you know, very elegantly done. You know, this у жорстокій лютій бій визволяти рідну Україну, боронити нарід свій. You know, and in Ukrainian, it really kind of just flows off the tongue. So that's that second verse. Maybe I'll stop here if anybody has questions or.
Do you want to maybe, yeah, if they have questions, or maybe does it recite that much, and then we'll pick up.
Yeah,
for
good.
next. How does that sound?
Okay. Yeah. So
and-
we'll start with that the baritone line there. Right.
Actually, yeah, because of the obscurity there, let's just start it from the
Okay.
from there. Yeah, I'll just scroll as you read.
Sure. Yeah. So I think for a little further down, we're going to take it from the Idesenu Navinu. You know.
Okay,
The second
very
verse.
very good.
That good?
Which would be
Yeah.
no,
There you go. Yep. So
Yep.
measure like 19, pick up to 20.
Mhm.
So this is the little chant, you know, where the mother is sort of talking to herself. She's going a little crazy, right? She's blithering as she's trying to deal with this reality of her son going off to war. So she's singing Navinu, Navinu, Idesinu, Navinu, Idesinu, moja ditino, u жорстокій лютий бій визволяти рідну Україну, боронити нарід свій. Then the high arcing tenor line, визволяти рідну Україну, боронити нарід свій. And again, you can't ever go wrong with overemphasizing r or v. V and R are friendly vowels. They friendly consonants. They'll never, you know, break the melodic line as you're singing through it. Okay. Now here's where it gets messy, because you got the, you know, the son singing the tenor solo, and then the choir singing the mother's line. And so I'll start with the tenor soloist for those of you who might, you know, be interested in trying it. So here's what he's singing. Well, actually, no, I'll do it the other way around. So the mother, this is the one where more of you are familiar with this. So in the original, it's straight laced. She sings Yak Vernesha mi. You know, she's just singing Yak Vernesha, but the rest of the choir is like a little bit of pang. You know, she's going oi Yak Vernesha mi sinu, right? And there you've got. I was telling Gabe that he probably wants to slow this down a little bit as he's conducting this, and my fault for not being clearer with the tempo markings, because there should be a pretty distinctive sort of slow down at this moment. He's kind of off in the distance. The son is already marching off. The mother is still trying to kind of hold on to him emotionally.
Alex, I noticed a couple of typos in the text, so I'm going to have to go back and revise this. So if you want to send me some tempo marks, I'll add them now.
Cool. Yeah. My apologies. I felt badly when Gabe was working on that the other day, because he was trying to be very faithful to what I did not write, you know, which is, you know, so my fault, you know, and so he's like going at it, you know, one clear tempo, and it's like, oh shoot, you know, dude, I really meant there should be like 4 or 5 different tempos in this piece, and I never marked them. So my apologies, you know. But anyway, yeah. So thank you, Louis. That's a kind offer. So okay, so she's singing, and again, this is like already a lamentation. So Ой, як вернешся, мій сину, тобі заквічаю, цвіт калиною, твій крізь. And what's happening
Oh,
there?
I'm sorry, I have to interrupt because there's an important cognate that's Tzvit Kalinoyu. The
Right.
Kalinoyu is related to the Kalinka
Right,
in Russian.
right, right. It's the same tree. It's the same, rowan bush is one
Right.
translation.
Right.
And actually, in terms of pronunciation, that is an important distinction. Kalina is the way you pronounce it in Ukraine as opposed to Kalina in Russian. So Kalina, you've got the, you notice in measure 38, Tzvit Kalinoyu, you want to pronounce it sort of a hard, non-palatalized L, Kalina. And that's also it turns out that that's a shrub or a flower that was the symbol of Ukrainian freedom. It was actually, there were a number of songs that were banned by the Soviets where whenever Ukrainians brought Kalina into the text, it meant that they were there was a subtext that they were singing about freedom. And so Kalina, again, Vitvitsky's very, very clever in the way that he kind of weaves that into the text. So so she's singing Svit Kalinoyu Tvi Kris. And so she says, I'm going to weave a garland of flowers up from the Kalina bush, and I'm going to place it on your rifle when you come home. And that's going to be the victory sign that the garland of flowers is going to be, I'm going to weave it around the barrel of your rifle.
How much should we trill the R in Kris?
Plenty, yeah.
Kris, okay.
Kris, Tvi Kris. And actually, Louis, that should be almost a sforzando, because she's singing about this lovely image of flowers and freedom and everything. But before he can get to that freedom, there's a gun, and it's like, there's Ibsen's famous line about, if the handgun's in the first act, you better have it go off in the last act. And so she's singing Tvi Kris, it's like, it's kind of a gasp when she's singing about the rifle. Maybe it's a little silly, but for what it's worth, that was the idea behind it. So
okay, we'll accent those. Okay, got it.
So thank you. That's a good idea, actually. So Tvi Kris, it's almost like she stumbles on that word, okay? And then in measure 39, Ne verneshся. Now this is where she's already grieving in anticipation of what she thinks is going to happen, which if you don't return, and you could say Yak ne verneshся, если не вернешься in Russian, right? If you don't return, but you notice there's no yak, there's no if, it's just ne verneshся. You don't come back, then I will go off and weep silently somewhere, where nobody sees my tears. So ne verneshся, ticho zarydаю. So I will quietly weep. Zarydat is, again, very distinctive word. The typical word for crying is plakate. It's, plakate is like to cry. It's a little baby can cry. But zarydate is more like, the image is more like the pietà. This is Mary grieving over the son, right? Or a mother really grieving with, disconsolate. Zarydate means kind of a disconsolate weeping. Ticho zarydayu, like she will weep and she will grieve deeply, but so nobody sees her tears. She wants him to know that she will be a heroic mother to her heroic son. That's kind of the concept there. So sliz is tears. So shtrob nichto ne bachив sliz. Shtrob is so that nichto means nobody. Ne bachив sliz, did not see my tears. And my is not, it doesn't occur there. So she could say ne bachiv moich sliz, but she says ne bachiv sliz, does not see tears. Nobody sees tears. Okay. So
now we go back to the tenor solo.
Right. And the tenor solo is trying to reassure her, don't worry, Ma, I'm coming back, right? That's what he's singing, right? So Oi vernusia. Oh, I will, Mom, I will. I'm going to come home, right? Oi vernusia moja nene. And that word nene, and Louis, I think you did a nice job, sort of highlighting that. Nene is not the Hawaiian goose. Nene, right? But nene is also an unusual word for mother. It's a very affectionate word. It's like a super term of endearment. So he's, and it's almost a folkloric word. It's got antiquity to it. So moja nene, jak kalina, and that's a double K, jak kalina, when the kalina tree zatsvite shall bloom, when the flowering bush is in bloom, jak kalina zatsvite. That's also a tough word, but hey, you guys have already sung a lot of multiple consonants in Georgian and Armenian, so this is a piece of cake for you, right? So zatsvite, prinesuya, I will bring to you, prinesuya, bringing I will. It's weird for American singers to have that syntax, but that's the way it works. Prinesu ya, measure 41, do tvoyeyi chate. And then again, watch the o, right? Very clear o, do tvoyeyi chate. And the ch I think in Russian too, it's a pretty open ch, kind of an aspirant, right? So in Ukrainian, definitely, do tvoyeyi chate. You don't want that to sound like a chate. You don't want to spit it out, okay? Do tvoyeyi chate, it should be a soft, gentle ch sound. Sonce voli, sonce being the sun, voli of freedom, zolote, golden. I think in Russian also, I think Pushkin often kind of juxtaposes adjectives, nouns, the objects and subjects are sometimes twisted around for more poetic effect. And here it's also sonce voli zolote, the sun of freedom, golden. Zolote means golden, okay? So that's basically it. And then at the very end, there's just that little addendum, which was not in the original and was probably a terrible, I mean, hopefully Wittwicki will forgive me from the next world that I messed around with his concept here. But this again is coming back after he sings that long little plaintive line, then the mother's weeping is all that you hear at the end that the chorus sings, Mi sinu Detino zachimte navinu pisho. And pisho should just be like a soft gone, it's just like withering with the horizon, or like a mirage on the horizon. So pisho should always be sung very gently and without accent. We sometimes, I didn't focus on this very much in the past. But yeah, you really want it just to kind of wither away as opposed to pisho. Sometimes, when we sung it, it sort of bursts at the end, and it really should. It should just like get extinguished at the end, like the sun setting on the horizon. But again, that sort of mi sinu, she's kind of heaving her sorrow. Mi sinu detino zachimte navinu pisho, just vanishes, right? So that's the way you should do it.
Okay, do you want to read through the mother's line verse and the son's verse one final time?
Yep.
All
okay,
right.
So I'm going to do the mother's verse first. So it's Oi jak verneșся mi sinu tobi za kvichaju, cvit kalinoju tvi kris. Jak ne verneșся, тихо заридаю, щоб ніхто не бачив сліз. And so that's the choral line, the mother's line, and the overarching that is the soloist who's singing, Ой, вернуся, моя нене, як калина зацвіте, принесу я до твоєї хати сонце волі золоте. And then the mother's last line, Mi sinu детино, зачим ти на війну пішов? And that's it.
Greg, just reviewing the comments here. So, I mean, everyone is saying that it's really good that we're going through and understanding not just the language, but what is it that we're singing here? And I think particularly in this song where you've got the mother and the son singing together, you kind of need to understand what's going on to make sense of it.
Yeah.
There was a question. Yeah, go ahead.
No, it's not easy. And it's very, I think one of the things that is really important is for the chorus to be super distinct, almost obnoxiously distinct in the words, in the way you articulate the words so that they come through, but it should be sung softly so that, you know, the soloist should be soaring over the choir as the mother is kind of almost muttering, the chorus is muttering to herself, right? She's kind of shaking her head in disbelief. I can't believe you're going. You're my child. I can't believe I'm going to lose you. You know, it's that kind of almost kind of quiet, psychotic grieving where she's beside herself, but she doesn't want it to be obvious or embarrassing to express herself openly. So she's clenching kind of her, you know, her heart to her chest and trying to be as discreet as she can be, but it's kind of impossible to be discreet as to what's going on in her mind.
Well, one question that came up, and sorry guys, this is something that Sibelius did. So Zaredayu, Shob, those are two different words. In the transliteration, they kind of are glommed together.
Yeah.
But if you look in the Cyrillic, in the baseline, you'll see it's two words with a comma in between. That's the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah. And that, if you can, shjob, that's shcha together like question. So shjob, even though it starts at the beginning of a word, it's good to kind of exaggerate that a little bit. Shjob, nichto ne bachiv sliz. And if you can extend that V across that little consonant cluster, that's a good thing. Shjob, nichto ne bachiv sliz. And without overemphasizing the S, but if you can get that V pronounced with the S de-emphasized, you're brilliant, and you guys are brilliant. So it'll be great.
Good. Any final questions? Well, Alex, this was super helpful.
Thank you. I'm glad.
It makes you think, shoot, I wish we'd had time to do this. You know, whenever we get together, we're always in a rush to go through stuff, but
Sure.
But here, this really benefits from taking the time to go through it in detail.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it. You know, the level of diligence you guys have shown has been extraordinary, and I really appreciate it. You know, at the risk of adding a hint of sadness to all of this, and it's, you know, it's upsetting, but you know, when we sang this at the end of back in '77, when we first brought it to Ukraine and the Soviet Union, you know, it was almost a commentary on the Vietnam War on a certain level. Like as I wrote it, you know, I was thinking about the Vietnam War, and you know, and it was extra poignant. You know, Ray Kinoshita always did such a fabulous job on the beautiful you know, tenor solo and so forth. But you know, I mean, Ukraine for a long time, you know, since independence, you know, basically avoided armed conflict until 2014. And then, you know, I mean, they really, I think, did an extraordinary job maintaining sort of nonviolent discipline between, you know, the dissident movement, you know, of the 60s and 70s, and then, you know, during the independence movement. I mean, it was a Gandhian movement that was almost impeccable in the way that they maintained that discipline. And then the Orange Revolution in 2004, and then for most of the uprising in 2013-14, when they kicked out Yanukovych, it was only in the last days that, you know, Yanukovych brought in the snipers and he started gunning people down. And we actually, our university lost a professor. This guy Bogdan Solchanik, on the last day of the protests. He was this brilliant guy, 29-year-old historian, wonderful person. He was also a poet, and I mean, it's true. So I'm not saying this for, but yeah, and he was, he had just been engaged to his sweetheart. And she said, listen, Bogdan, you've gone, like, you've been, out in the Maidan, in the protest for 3 different times. Like, you don't have to go back there. Why do you need to go back there a 4th time? And he literally, he said to her, listen, I want to marry you in a free country. And he never came back. So, yeah. So, I mean, it's, it's a little too much realpolitik, it's a little too much of that, but, and I have a nephew who's out there now on the front lines. I have a nephew, Roman, crazy kid. I mean, he was a crazy kid. Then he went into the army and it kind of straightened him out. And his mother, I mean, literally, his mother's literally beside beside herself, because she's also an invalid. She had severe stroke, and he shouldn't even be out there. He's the only son. I mean, it's so, yeah. So, I mean, it's almost too painful to sort of think about the reality of this. But so anyway, so if you guys would keep little Roman in your prayers, I'd be grateful. But anyway, but no, this is great. You guys have always done well by this song, so I'm really, really grateful to you all. And and Louis, you've done a fabulous job. This is really, a wonderful thing to pull all this stuff together. It's really remarkable. So thank you. Yep. Got you mute on.
Yeah, so yeah, it'll be great to do these again with a fuller appreciation of what we are singing and why we're singing it. It's great.
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly say that going over the lyrics to the song brought back, I think, the most recent time I sang it, which was in Charlottesville.
Yeah.
When you conducted, Alex, and your rehearsing it gave us so much depth on this song that just going over the lyrics gives me chills. It's marvelous. Please do it as often as you can.
Thank you, Stu. We'll try to do it as often as we can. God bless you. Thanks. Yeah. No, you guys have always done well. I remember it was a beautiful, I mean, Charlottesville will always stand out in my memory as like one of the most gratifying concerts. And that wonderful moment where that gentleman came in as I think we were singing Steal Away, and the fellow, that really statuesque African-American man, came in from the back of the hall. I mean, it was almost like a ghost-like moment. It was fantastic. I mean, there were so many like little, it was phenomenal. Yeah.
So in response to Andy Gordon's request, I am going to, after save the recording, I'm going to run it through a transcription engine so we can get a written transcript. Unfortunately, that's going to make a mess of the Ukrainian. So for that, it'll take some work to get that together, but it'll be great, I think, to have a written record of this that people can refer back to without having to see the whole video. So we'll make that available also.
That's a very good idea.
Thank you. Great.
All right. Well, I think we're good then. Thank you, Alex. Thanks.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you all. Thanks. And
it's great.
Can't wait to sing with you all in person,
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, we will. It'll happen, God willing, we'll get it all together.
It'll happen in small bits and then large.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very good.
Well, have a great evening. Thanks, everybody.
Very good. Thanks. Right. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Alex.
Take care. You bet. God bless.